Hi, everyone. Sorry. Minister will be with you guys in a second. Apologies.
No worries.
I am all set up. We gotta go. Bye. There we go. All right, he should be here in a couple minutes. I'm just going to put it on closed screen until he comes back, okay?
Sounds fair. Thank you. We're just populating our guest list.
You still tracking to get live here?
Yes, we're just waiting for all the guests to populate in, Minister. We'll be right with you. All right, and here we go. So welcome everyone to the Meet the Northern Ministers virtual town hall with the Honorable Victor Fidelity, Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, the Honorable Greg Rickford, Minister of Energy, Northern Development, Mines and Indigenous Affairs, and the Honorable Ross Romano, Minister of Training Colleges and Universities. Today's Timmins broadcast is proudly sponsored by Timmins Chamber member Ecom Timber Corporation, and in Sudbury it is being presented by their sponsor, Eastlink. Our event has been coordinated in partnership with Timmins, Greater Sudbury, North Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, and Thunder Bay Chambers of Commerce. The strength of our Northern Chamber network has never been stronger, and it is good news for the businesses that we serve in our communities. I would like to say that even virtually, it is important that we acknowledge we are sheltering in place on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe peoples, and I would like to acknowledge the Métis Nation of Ontario. As some businesses begin to slowly reopen, every business in our respective communities, sorry, I lost my screen, will be subject to rapid government legislation and support mechanisms as they are implemented. When chambers engage with local elected officials, it provides our members with the opportunity to speak to government directly. All of our advocacy work that we undertake on your behalf depends on the input we receive from you, the business owners. No other organization than your chamber better understands the impact this crisis has had on small business owners in our communities. who do so much to support our charities, our sports teams, our nonprofits, and indeed our tax base. In an effort to ensure that you remain informed with the most up-to-date and accurate information, we are pleased to host the Honourable Ministers to learn how the provincial government plans to continue to support you through this pandemic. The Timmins Chambers Cameron Grant and Sudbury Chambers Syed Raza are on hand to receive your questions during this virtual town hall, and I would ask that you submit your questions in the chat box that you see on the side of your screen. Please note that we will do our best to answer your question as time permits, and that all questions will be recorded and shared with each respective government representative. To our friends in the media who we know are watching, this town hall is being recorded, and should you wish to acquire a recording, please reach out to Cameron at the Timmins Chamber via email, and we will get the recording to you. Each respective chamber will also have the recording available to post on their social media and websites. Thank you for ensuring our community receives accurate and timely information during these unprecedented times. And I would like to begin by thanking the ministers, Fedeli, Rickford, and Romano, for joining us today. And with respect to the time, I'm going to jump into the Q&A portion of our session, unless the ministers have any opening comments.
I'd love to make a few comments, if you don't mind. I think it's important for the chamber to chambers across the region to understand a couple of key elements to how we're thinking and dealing with this. And first of all, a special shout out to Vic and Ross, not just for joining us today, but for the incredible work in Vic's case that he's doing with respect to the essential business list. This is no easy task, and I can't think of a better guy to do it as an entrepreneur himself and someone who's struck an important balance in complex health data with the realities of business and the impact that COVID has had on us. I just want to, if I can, just kind of highlight a couple of things that may add to the quality of the questions and their responses. As you know, just a couple of quick topics, and then I'll get out of this. The province-wide reopening framework, of course, is readily available for you, and I think there'll be some information fairly quickly in the day or coming days as to how some of that is going to start to play out. But there are some initiatives for northern businesses I wanted the chamber to know about that they members may not completely know. The Regional Opportunities Investment Tax Credit, supporting investment. Ontario is proposing a new 10% refundable corporate income tax credit to eligible businesses that are constructing, renovating, or acquiring qualifying commercial and industrial buildings. All regions of Northern Ontario would be eligible for this. Of course, the $6 billion in tax referrals has applications to businesses and the liquidity needs of more than 100,000 businesses, but very much includes Northern Ontario. But some Northern Ontario specific things, and then I'll get out of this. The Northern Ontario Heritage Fund loan repayment deferrals. I've given direction to defer any repayments of principal and interest on a loan coming due during the 3-month period beginning April 1st to the end of June 2020, waiving all interest that accrues on the loan during the period beginning March 20th to the end of June 2020, and extending the maturity date of the loan by 3 months. Loan payments will resume on July 1st, 2020. And something just new that we've been discussing this started out with the chambers in Northwestern Ontario call that I had, and that was taking a look at the importance of the chambers across the Northern Ontario and trying to support their ongoing staffing needs. Some have obviously face serious difficulty and in some instances laid people off, or if they've got the CERB, we're interested in topping that up so that there could never be in a more important time for a chamber to be in business, and looking at helping support membership. This is not a time for them to shrink. It's a time for them to grow so that we can send important business information out, respond to what your memberships are saying, and just create better opportunities. Then very briefly, the Northern property taxpayers, there'd be a deferral in property taxes and business in parts of Northern Ontario located outside of municipal boundaries. I've just recently address the GA smoothing. And to support medium and large electricity consumers, we're deferring a portion of the global adjustment over 3 months. And I think working from there to help out energy intensive, electricity intensive businesses, many of which exist in Northern Ontario. And done various activities for mining and Indigenous. So sorry for that indulgence, folks. I have more information under some of those topics. I thought it would be worthwhile putting those out. And I'd be interested in your feedback, particularly with respect to what the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund can do. We're looking very seriously at creating a temporary tranche for a COVID response, and I'll take feedback not just from chamber members and my Northern Ontario colleagues as to what that might look like and how it can serve you best. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Minister. And Minister Romano, do you have any opening comments or just into the Q&A?
I am happy to just proceed into the Q&A. I'll just say welcome. Thank you, everyone. Sorry I got on late. I guess you reached your maximum 100 participants and it wouldn't let me in, but I'm in now. Happy to engage. I think everybody might be aware I had another meeting I had to run to at 2 p.m. So I don't want to speak any further, and I'm sure Mr. Reckford will appreciate that as well. I tend to be long-winded at times. So I'll stop there and say thank you. Look forward to chatting further. Here's the nod of approval.
Don't say a word, Vic.
Well, we are still waiting for Minister Fedeli, who I believe is still with the Premier actually right now. So,
oh yeah, make an announcement.
Yes.
All right, well, let's get rolling. Let's
answer some questions. And I see a question here from the birthday boy, Rory Ring, over in Sault Ste. Marie. And I'm wondering if anyone could speak to what the guidelines for opening outdoor food service patios may be, or if we should save that one for Vic.
Well, Vic certainly has the most up-to-date information on that, colleagues, but the questions like these, I'm finding this out very quickly around marinas and lake-based businesses. I think what we're going to try to do, and I'm not thinking, we're actually going to put together a package tailor-made for the people attending this forum today and distribute it through chambers so people are clear on what businesses can and can't do. I mean, you know, we try to cover everything. Vic will tell you, like, when you think you've got all your bases covered. Yesterday, I got a call from a buddy of mine who has a boat yard, and, you know, he's getting calls because he puts boats in the water. He says, I'm not a marina, but I'm getting asked from out of province people to put boats in the water. What can and can't do? And you come to find out that these are little gray areas that creep up. So I think we want to put together a package and disseminate that through the chambers. And Vic would have more information on this, but I've got a great group of staff whose ears are on this conference today. And if we can't answer your specific questions today, we will get that information to you as quickly as possible. So be sure you self-identify there to the recorders, and we'll get the answers to the questions you need.
Yeah, so that is great advice. Thank you. And that's great advice. So be sure to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. We have more than 200 people joining us today, so there may not be time to answer all of the questions. So let's make sure that we can send those off to the staff working with the minister's teams post today, and see if we can get those answers right back to you. So I do see a question here from Minister Rickford, and I know you mentioned NOHFC earlier, and it's a very important arm for Northern Ontario, a very important funding mechanism. So I know you mentioned a little bit about previously approved projects, but we're talking about some significant time and schedule delays at this point. So wondering about extensions for open and previously approved NOHFC projects.
You mean in terms of their construction? Sorry, I'm distracted by Ross's sport coat there.
I think it's quite snappy.
Unlike wearing a sport coat like that inside your house there.
So the question is, companies with previously approved NOHFC projects are seeing significant time and schedule delays. Yeah. So I think they can't get shovels in the ground.
They will be, Keitha. I'm sorry, okay. And I should be more serious, just trying to bring a little levity to this. This is not an unfamiliar a problem to NOHFC or the government of Ontario in general. In fact, I had a conversation with the Minister of Infrastructure, and we're going to run into a lot of problems with recently announced construction projects, and frankly, ones that are in the hopper with NOHFC and ones we'd like to roll out. There's going to be a backlog of construction projects for time to come. The good news is that these will be major employment opportunities for communities across the north. So we're not going to stop doing them, but absolutely, we are going to take a look at the terms of those contracts, and we'll design them to meet your needs so that they reflect the pressures that are going to be on construction and in the most general to the most specific on a project-to-project basis. But yeah, this is something that we'll have to modify.
And one of the other questions around NOHFC, Minister, is also wondering, due to the pandemic, would the program look to be opened up to the service industry where it's previously been unavailable?
Well, as I said before, we're building a COVID tranche out of NOHFC. I still have to talk to a board that's been significantly overhauled in the past year, in particular, the past several months. And get their feedback. We make those decisions together, but I've got a great team working on this. Again, we'll put out those proposals through the chambers. I think that's the best way to get it out to their businesses. And we want to cover as many businesses as we can. What we don't want to do, what we want to do is be a backstop for places that that other provincial and federal government did not cover. What we don't want is to have a redundant or in certain instances a stackable program for businesses. Resources are not infinite, so we want to make sure that these are targeted and are serving, no pun intended, to the service industry, their specific needs through programs that they couldn't otherwise get access to. So we're busy canvassing. That's why we're doing this call today. That's why we've met with the chambers out in northwestern Ontario, and I think we're proposing in the not too distant future a more focused discussion with the presidents of each chamber. So after this meeting, to meet with them, hopefully the presidents will have consolidated their data. We'll integrate it to what we're looking at in terms of supports and opportunities that we can create, and be effective with NOHFC.
There's also a question in the queue, Minister, about approval waiting time at this point. So they're wondering about those projects that are subject to approval by the NOHFC board. Is there anything that can be done to speed up analysis and approval?
The short answer is yes. We were pretty caught up with NOHFC by the end of the year. Obviously, we reserved the right to modify the programs that were available in the new year, and that might create problems given the way that NOHFC has a rolling kind of admission. But we're communicating effectively with people who might have, and there would be very few who would fall into that kind of scenario. But NOHFC is under a significant renovation. We've heard loud and clear on what doesn't work, and we certainly want to preserve and protect what is working. But we want to ensure that all businesses, for example, you pointed out the service industry, certain segments there didn't have access to NOHFC, and they're going to be hit badly by COVID. And one would argue are important to the business profile or complexion of various towns and cities and Indigenous communities across the province. So everything's on the table. We had finalized something that we thought was based on a lot of good engagement, but we will certainly, as a board, we're going to meet first and foremost to approve what a COVID response might look like, any additional resources that we might use so that they don't impact the target. Oh, there's Vic there. Handsome Vic with his famous yellow tie. I was just singing your praises, Vic, about and questions about essential businesses. And I just reviewed all the different things that we're doing specifically for Northern Ontario and NOHFC. A lot of good questions about what we can do to support the service industry, and I let the folks know that we're going to work with the chambers across the province. We actually want to figure out a way to shore up their employment, maybe even increase employment opportunities at chambers through NOHFC, and provide membership relief for businesses that are really struggling. And I know you and I chatted about this. This is not a time for chambers to shrink, Vic. It's a time for them to expand and be a major conduit for us as we endeavor to figure out how we can best serve northern businesses. I was off on a bit of a tangent there because this is all very exciting. Can I turn it over to you, Vic, for some impromptu comments?
Thank you very much. I apologize for coming on late and having to leave early, by the way. The Premier and I just made an announcement. If you were watching the national news, you would see that we've announced 3 major changes, all improvements. Thank you to the Chambers of Commerce, Keitha, and all your members across the North, and to all the individual chambers. Thank you very much. We announced that as of Friday morning, garden centers and nurseries will be open to the public as opposed to curbside. Saturday morning, all hardware stores and safety supply stores will be open to the public, not curbside. And beginning Monday morning, curbside will be for all retail that have a storefront in Ontario. So these are 3 very, very major improvements and guidance and help to the retail sector. And I have to say, to people, companies, proud Canadian companies like Canadian Tire and Home Hardware, who've been so diligent and so patient, and their corporate brands are never been stronger. We say thank you to them for their patience, and it's time to get out and support all of these businesses right across the North.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for those announcements from our business community who are eager to serve the public safely. Yes, so we'll be working to share that information with all of our members who can get back to business. So I do have a question for Minister Romano, and I know that he does have to dash off as we are squeezed in with very busy schedules with all of our ministers. So the question again from the birthday boy, Rory Ring, colleges and universities being an integral part of the community's economies reopening, how do you see the role starting to change because of the pandemic? And we've seen how we've had to embrace technology globally. How can Ontario play a bigger role in building the workforce of the future?
Well, thank you for the question, Rory. And I saw a few questions that had some similar themes, so I'll try to cover a lot of those given the time restrictions. I think what we know is that obviously every single institution has been impacted. It's a question of at what level of impact every institution will have. I certainly have concerns, and we have concerns within our ministry for especially a lot of those smaller institutions, which are in all of your communities. We know that larger institutions have a greater ability to navigate through a crisis like this, given the level of reserves that they have on hand. So a lot of our smaller institutions have certainly been impacted, and we were able to get out of the gates very early during this pandemic in late March, and we announced some significant funding, which was very beneficial to all of our institutions, but I would argue especially so for all of our northern and rural smaller size schools. And so the average per institution would have been anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million that they each received in relief, which they were allowed to spend as they saw fit. That was in addition to some other measures that we took specifically for students, as well as making sure that we can maintain the academic continuity. And it was a lot more difficult than one would think to ensure that you could take the mass of students, of which we have somewhere in the neighborhood of just shy of 600,000 in Ontario, and be able to get those all through, given that the pandemic hit us at a time that was only approximately a month before graduation. So to be able to get the proctoring of examinations done and grading of examinations done took a lot of a significant hands-on deck approach, and was a significant task to overcome so that we can get our graduates through and that we can allow students to finish their year. Now, I'll park that for a moment and get into more of what we see moving forward. I think there's no way to predict, obviously, the level of the impact. We're still in the process of gauging that across all of our sectors, and we're no different in universities and colleges. What we know is if you look back to 2008, 2009, when we went through our recession, there was a significant investment by both federal and provincial governments in infrastructure. So we have seen some investments from the federal government, and certainly our government has been making investments. And we do have some work in the infrastructure area, which I think will be significantly beneficial for our universities, colleges, and obviously the communities that they represent. And given we're in a Northern Ontario Chamber setting here, we recognize, and certainly my colleagues and all of you would recognize, that in our communities that have colleges and universities, they are in many respects the largest employers within those communities. So significant infrastructure improvements within those institutions would go a long way to helping out the community itself as well. Another significant benefit that we saw after the 08-09 recession, and I suspect that we will see it again now, is we saw a significant increase in enrollment, both domestic and international enrollment. And we have now learned, we were already moving in this direction for digital learning, which positioned us very well to be prepared for the pandemic. But what we have learned, all of us, throughout all of our areas, is there's a lot of other ways to do things, embracing technology, and in the context of virtual learning within the post-secondary environment, we've been able to make some significant moves forward, if you will, in that area. And we've seen a substantial benefit from it. And I think we will continue to see more of that as we move forward in the post-COVID world. The last thing I want to wrap up on, and I saved this for last, there's something that we were already working on, and we really hope to turn up the dial on it now, and that's micro-credentials. And when you think of micro-credentials in the post-COVID world, I think that the opportunity that exists for our institutions, for our communities, and for the people within them is going to be substantial, because we will see a lot of people who will look at the loss of employment, who will look at a shuffling of employment, and who will think now maybe retooling, retraining is a really good idea today. And the customary thought of, I need a 3 or a 4 year degree, which is very problematic for people who are already in the working world, will be a lot easier if you look at micro-credential specialized training that you can do in 12 to 16 weeks. It's not going to be nearly as costly. It's not going to be nearly as timely. And I think we will see a significant increase of people who are looking to do that. So what would be great is if we could see more of our private sector look at ways to work together with institutions within their communities to develop programs together. And the more we have those, the better that is for our students, the better it is for the organization. We heard long before COVID regularly that people couldn't find workers, right? We had this constant concern of people without jobs and jobs without people. But it's not as if the graduates weren't there. We just have to maybe specialize their training better. And I think we can do a lot of that through the micro-credentials. So I hope that gives a general sort of picture on all those different questions I saw.
Thank you, Minister. That's helpful. And I do notice that a number of you are commenting to folks directly in the Q&A, which is helpful just because of our limited time and the number of questions that we're seeing. That's great. I will remind everyone that is viewing, if they type their questions in the Q&A or the chat box, we will forward all of those questions off to the various ministers' teams, and we will try and get answers back for you. So if we don't have time to answer them right here live, because we are working with a limited time schedule, then please have confidence that the ministers are committed to ongoing communication with you, and we will make sure to get that information to them. But that being,
if I could just add to that,
sure.
We will record the questions as well, and our offices will endeavor to answer every question. There's some really good ones here on the chat that I'm reading, and I'm trying to respond to them as we do our work. And I just want folks to know, I'm going to stay a little bit longer because I think Vic we actually got jammed here today because there was a call from, well, the Premier's office. He never jams us. We just, it's our schedule. But they called a call with the northern mayors to talk about the impacts on cottage country. And obviously that's critical to us. I'll stay back because Vic and Ross, I'm not sure if he's joining it, but I've got a number of mayors. We've got a totally different situation out here in Northwestern Ontario in some respects, but that's the only reason the timing's compromised, Keith. So know that my staff are on here and some of Vic's who do a lot of the heavy lifting in the ECDEV space for Northern Ontario to track what you need moving from here.
Thanks for doing that. I apologize again. I fully planned to be on this entire call, but first it was the announcement and now it's the mayor's call that the Premier said, I want you on that call at 2:15.
Nobody does what the Premier says better than Vic, colleagues. I got to tell you that, eh, Ross?
Absolutely.
Wins.
I do have to run, and with the most recent announcement, I just want to make sure Greg knows and everybody hears, I will try to order a jacket just like this for you, Minister Rickford. I know how badly you would love to have one. I unfortunately have to sign off to
Ontario Public Service Audio
my apologies. I have to run to another call as well here. I have a committee meeting at 2 p.m. that I have to run to. I'm late with Minister Bethenfaldy. So
Thank you, Minister.
but I do have a staff member who will also be recording questions and responding. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks
it's okay, colleagues. I'll
trying to
stay
squeeze
on
this in.
for the team.
Mr. Fedeli, did you want to say anything before you sign off? I know you're really pressed for time.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good for about another 10 minutes, actually, Keitha.
Okay, well then let's talk a little bit about businesses, outdoor businesses. You mentioned marinas earlier, and some of the questions that I'm seeing are from our outfitter businesses, and they're kind of wondering where they are in the queue, I guess. And if I get one more call at the chamber office about fire bans, I'm gonna have some tears. I'm gonna have some tears. So
well, I'll leave fire bans in Minister Rickford's hands. I can tell you about outdoors.
Okay.
Everything we're doing in a staged framework. We announced this last week, about a week ago Monday, that it's a set of guidelines. It's not a calendar, but we announced the 3 stages that we want to follow. There's a little bit more outdoor that comes in stage 1, a lot more outdoor in stage 2, and of course, fully opened in stage 3. A few days later, Minister McNaughton announced the sector by sector guidelines. I encourage everybody on this call to go to ontario.ca coronavirus /coronavirus. That's the site that has all of these guidelines. So you'll find these are a signal that your sector is going to be opening soon. I would say that's the best way I can tell you that. So we did a pre-stage announcement last week by saying golf courses and marinas can open for prep work only. No public will be allowed. And that means, where the ice has crushed the docks. I'm thinking of down the street from my place in Callander. The ice has crushed the docks over at Sunbeam Lodge. This allows them to get out and get the docks repaired. All the boats that are under wraps, get them unwrapped, get them prepared. All that can happen now, so that when the announcement comes, and the fact that we're allowing this pre-stage to happen, pretty good signal that it's going to happen soon. So between that and going on the website and seeing, hey, my sector is now on the website, that's a pretty good signal that we're getting there.
Vic, just something that I got hit with, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm raising this more as an issue. I've actually fielded quite a few calls from business cottage and boat repair and maintenance groups. These are not folks who operate marinas, but people who put boats in marinas for folks. I had a great conversation with 2 guys last night who said, Jesus, Greg, we don't want to break any of the rules out here with respect to, we get the readiness, but they're not actually the marina. So they're prepping boats to go into marinas. And more importantly, the lion's share, as you can imagine, out here are from people not in Ontario, from different jurisdictions. So this is not for you to spend much time with. I got to get clarity out of the medical health officers. But this goes to the complexity. I was bragging about how well you've done with this essential business, and our conversations around just when you think you got it, boom, something sneaks in there that just, could not possibly cover everything. And this was one of them. And yet it's a big concern. There's a lot of yards out there with boats in them ready to go in who are not marina operators. So
it's the law of unintended consequences
Yeah,
that
that's
always
right.
happens. But I would suggest, whenever I want to call up the list, I can never remember the actual address. I just Google Ontario essential businesses and up comes the site. Go on the site. There's 44 essential businesses that were on it yesterday. There'll be more now as of the announcement at 1 o'clock. Go on there and look under transportation and you'll see road, rail, air, water, or marine, however it's called, and just see if you interpret it that way. I'm not giving you advice, anybody, that yes, you can or no, you can't. That's not our job as politicians. Go and look at the list yourself. Make an interpretation that whether you feel you qualify with the exact wording or not. That's what my advice would be. And a lot of times you'll see the word strictly or essential. Govern yourself accordingly. If you're a business, you are going to be judged when all this is over. Your moral fiber and your business reputation is going to be judged. That's why I say companies like Home Hardware and Canadian Tire, who played by the rules and were very, very affected, they reputationally will come out of this thing very, very strong, as will all the independent hardware stores.
And we do see a number of questions in the Q&A about my industry. Can I do this? Can I do that? So I think you're hearing it, folks, here from the minister to go check the essential services list and see if you feel that your industry fits in there. And if so, if you feel that you can safely and comfortably offer your services to the community.
Premier says use common sense, right? Those are his guiding words as well. Safety and well-being of families and your employees, and use common sense.
One of the questions, Minister, is around, is there going to be a public health guidebook that businesses could use? Is there, you shall do this and you shall do this? Will something like that come out of from public health officials?
The Ministry of Labor put this up on their website. This is the guidelines, sector by sector guidelines that talk about how you can proceed, and you'll see it. There's one for restaurants as an example. So go to that, ontario.ca coronavirus, and you'll see it. It's about the third item down. I would highly recommend anybody in business have a look and see if their sector is already listed. It's pretty good. It's done in conjunction with Chief Medical Officer of Health, Ministry of Health, put out by the Ministry of Labor.
So if you are one of those, sorry, go ahead, Minister.
If I can just add to that, look, nobody understood the challenges of smaller businesses than Vic and I as members of cabinet, largely with regions with small towns and cities. We actually feel strongly now that on the basis of these guidelines, smaller businesses are likely better positioned to implement guidelines for safe shopping once we move beyond curbside. Frankly, it's been my experience just having gone to Walmart and the likes that as great a job as they've done, I think the smaller businesses will be in a position, the way this has been set up, to support them. I just want to also, there's a guy here, there's so many questions popping up. I lost his question. Sorry, I thought it was Helen. It's not Helen, Francis. Yeah, there was a question about northern operators, and I just want to deal with that straight up. We intend to try our best to offer something to northern tourist operators. We understand the complexity of your businesses more than others, and we'll certainly endeavor to create something in the NOHFC. There couldn't be anything more pertinent to our heritage than seasonal operators. So we'll do our best to come up with something that works for those businesses.
Great, we appreciate that. Someone is looking for something around funding about the creative sector. So specific to additional funding to the Ontario Arts Council. Can you confirm if that's something that maybe NOHFC would take on with the creative sector?
not flat-footed there. Just I was trying to recall. Oh, I've been working very closely with Lisa MacLeod, Keith, the minister responsible for tourism, sports, culture, and recreation. And we're going to work together to ensure that we've got as many different kinds of businesses covered. We'd like to create opportunity, but we have a constituent already that we're trying to serve. COVID for things like NOHSC can't be a place to necessarily in the COVID tranche to support new businesses. We're always open to looking at the broader program for that. We already think we do quite a bit of creativity, especially when it comes to audio and visual arts, and more specifically in film and television. But in a future version of what we're doing here today, Lisa's agreed to join us to make sure that there's a high degree of complementarity in terms of what we're offering. And in fact, I'm quite hopeful that the federal minister will join one of our sessions here, Melanie Joly, or her parliamentary assistant who's responsible for FedNor, just so we make sure we get this right.
Yeah, the Northern Chambers have an organized session with Minister Joly on Friday morning at 9:15. So for those that are joining us today, if you're interested in speaking with the minister Friday morning at 9:15, you can register with your local chamber. That's Pan Northern for all 26 Northern Chambers. So that'll be a great event. One of the questions, Minister Rickford, and maybe on behalf of the Northern ministers, is there any discussion on opening Northern regions at a different pace than larger centers? So just because I guess better geographical spread here in the North.
Yeah, look, guys, you're talking to an old, young, as you can see here, but an old Northern nurse who spent a lot of time in the communities in public and community health space. And so I've got a slightly different view on this. Regionalizing this province, given its vastness, might intuitively sound like it makes sense. But in my view, and this is supported by the emerging health data that we're seeing, it is in all of Ontario's best interests to make best efforts to have one rule for coming out of this that fits all. That sounds like a ginormous task, but if you take a look at the reasons why certain regions should have the same level of adherence as others, it makes more sense. So for example, out in Northwestern Ontario, right now in Kenora Rainy River, we have no COVID. So should we be one of the regions like other parts of say, Southwestern Ontario, who similarly are saying, let our rural areas open up? Okay, well, just how would that look? Within 2 weeks, we would see an influx in the city of Kenora that would double its size immediately in one weekend. COVID would be here. So we have 4 level 2 trauma ICU beds in Kenora, serving a district the size of the United Kingdom. There would be COVID introduced at this point. The numbers were flattening the curve, but we have a compelling reason to come out of this slowly and cautiously that are different from other regions who either want more caution or less. And that's why I think the Premier's been rock solid in his approach by trying not to regionalize it. Now, some of those fissures are coming to manifest themselves. So for example, cottage country is on the docket right now as we speak. And in an effort to give you folks as much time as I can, I do need to pivot to that meeting shortly, because this will be one of the areas that starts to show the potential need to regionalize this. Thinking of Northwestern Ontario or Timmins as cottage country, given the duress, for example, that Timmins healthcare resources are under right this minute with respect to COVID and non-COVID related items, would be different from what Muskoka, if you guys really consider, Muskoka, cottage country in the purest sense of the word, but different from cottage country as we had experienced it in Timmins or in Kenora. You think that for vast regions, parts of Northern Ontario could be regionalized. And indeed, we're starting to see some local or regional health units making decisions that are different from what the provincial health officer is saying. We'll leave that to them to decide. So, for example, Hallam and Norfolk told cottagers coming down to Turkey Point and Featherstone to go to hell, like you're not allowed here. You can see the responses from some of those property owners up in Thousand Islands and whatnot are saying, no, we have property rights to exercise. They're fundamental, and we're coming to our cottage. So this is a very important meeting that's going on right now. It was scheduled beyond our means, and I'm sorry, Keitha, that it conflicted with this, but quite easily we'll continue this discussion because this fora is awesome for Business Sense. But the short answer, that was the Ross Romano answer. So just being able to talk endlessly, I'm kidding, Ross. He's not on. He didn't deserve that shot. I should have said it to his face. But the short answer is not yet are we prepared to start thinking regionally.
And what about the cost of all of this to government? Maybe you want to address that. Has the government started to calculate what this will cost the taxpayers of Ontario?
Well, it's already cost the taxpayers. Anytime a government, some of these announcements coming out of the federal government, I call it helicopter money. It just lands and takes off. I remind all my colleagues, and in my conversations with the federal government, I've asked some of my colleagues I deal directly with to refer to this as being on behalf of the taxpayer of Canada. And also things that we can't afford. Government money it's not theirs, it's taxpayers. So that's why we're doing this right now, Keitha, to ensure that if the collective contributions of the tax coffers of this nation and of this province are going to be put to good use for the greater good, that we hear directly from the people who are likely in need of it the most in the context of COVID-19.
Well, in the interest of time, and I know you do have another meeting to get off to, but I would ask one last question, and this has just been on our minds quite consistently within the past 2 weeks, is what about the students? Where are the student summer jobs? And I know that's a federal responsibility, but I was bound to ask.
Well, I think Canada Summer Jobs, from what I understand, has proposed some kind of subsidy for wages or giving them resources. I think we're on the cusp of the kind of reopenings that will create opportunities. I'm a guy who believes that it's the desire of businesses to employ people, not the responsibility of government to ensure employment. So I want to look, for NOHFC's purposes, I want to look at creating the kinds of things that can get interns back to work in the context of COVID-19. So what is different? What has changed? Well, the way that we're doing work is changed. And certainly we're going to find out now with Vic's announcement today that curbside delivery is going to be a different way, but that shouldn't compromise the employment opportunities or the access of those small businesses to NOHFC for its interns. So some of that I see going back to normal in the sense that those positions will still be available for young people, students, but their jobs will look differently, and they'll learn a lot more of it and about it, and businesses will be better off for it. I mean, I'm looking at this right now, Keith, and I know I'm dipping into my meeting time, but this is really important information. We get so caught up in the issues that this pandemic is. We also need to debrief on the opportunities that it's created. What can curbside delivery do to enhance your business when it's running at full tilt? How do you use different technologies to reach a broader audience by the new ways you're doing business? The Attorney General has done in 2 weeks what it's taken them 25 years to get to. If you think of all the prisoners that go back and forth to courts, who all of a sudden don't want to now because of COVID, well, guess what? Like, we're saving millions of dollars by doing it that way. Universities and colleges have found out in a matter of a month how to continue to protect the degrees that their students are working on. Otherwise, inexplicably, it would have taken a long time. So I want to focus on opportunities as much as I can and do issues. And I see a bright side to this if we approach it the right way. Think about it the right way.
Appreciate that and appreciate your time. And I will remind everyone as we are close to wrapping up so that we can let the minister get off to his next call. Please, if you've submitted an anonymous question, if you even reach out to your local chamber with that question, they can feed those to the minister's office while maintaining your anonymity. So, but other than that, all of the questions that are in our Q&A as well as our chat box are being submitted to the ministers, all three, and all of their staff and the ministers themselves. If we haven't answered those questions today, we will definitely have them get back to you, so you can work through your local chamber who have all had great access to all three of these ministers throughout this time. So I will, with that, wrap us up for this session, but I would like to thank Minister Vic Fedeli, Minister Greg Rickford, and Minister Ross Romano for joining us today and taking the time out of their very busy schedules to speak to the Northern business community. At this time, I want to encourage you as participants to reach out to your local chambers should you have any business-related questions with respect to COVID-19 legislation and the support mechanisms that are in place to support your enterprise. Again, our thanks to ECOM and EastLink for supporting today's event. And on behalf of the Northern Chambers of Commerce, thank you all for joining us and for tuning in to find out how we are working with the province to support your business. We remain here for your business, the recovery and safety of our communities, and thank you for your ongoing support of your chambers. We are honored to serve you all. With that, I ask you all to be safe and be well, and thank you all for the time today.
Thank you.
Take care.